Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Final Fantasy Dimensions. What's Final Fantasy Dimensions, you may ask? Final Fantasy Dimensions is a Final Fantasy game on mobile, that being iOS and Android. Now I know what you're thinking, this is not a gacha game, this is not a pay-to-win game, this is not a multiplayer game, this is a single-player, wholly original Final Fantasy game. Now I think initially when this game first came out, you would pay for it by chapter, and then they would release these chapters incrementally, but you do now have the option to pay for this game entirely with one payment. I believe it cost me $14 or $15 to do so. But yeah, no other scummy mobile game shenanigans, no ads, you don't have to be connected to online to be playing the game. The fact that they chose to only release this on mobile is confusing, and I do wonder how come they never did port this game to any other platform so that those who didn't want to put up with the mobile game controls had other options. But because this is only a mobile game, I do feel like this game often goes ignored within the Final Fantasy fan base. So that's not to say that there aren't other mobile game frustrations with this, with any game. Obviously you are working with touchscreen controls, and I do feel like this game doesn't do touchscreen controls as well as the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. You're going to have to do a lot of scrolling in this aspect, especially if you're navigating through all your characters and their spells and equipment. Visually, it doesn't look like the best Final Fantasy game. It looks like a pseudo pixel kind of style. I think I'm just spoiled by the pixel remasters, and so because this game doesn't reach that level of graphics, then it makes me disappointed in it. But I have found that playing JRPGs on my phone does offer its advantages. For instance, it makes it very easy to just pull out and play a couple battles if that's all you have time for. If you're sitting on the toilet and you'll be there for a couple minutes, you do have an option for entertainment in that regard. I do think it also offers a more conspicuous way to be playing games compared to whipping out the Nintendo Switch and everyone looks at you like you're weird. But there are many aspects that in this game's core design that I think don't align with the platform that it is coming out on, and we'll talk more about that later. So this game does something a little differently. In this game, you're introduced to all 8 of your main characters pretty quickly, and they are of opposing forces. There are 4 on one side, 4 on the other. They consider each other enemies, but they find themselves in the midst of a giant crystal being shattered, thus splitting the world into basically 2 worlds, the world of light and the world of darkness. And this certainly isn't the first time that a Final Fantasy game has played around with the idea of these 2 different worlds. But these groups got all mixed up. And so 2 people from one group and 2 people from another group get mixed up together, and they are now the Warriors of Light. And then the other 4 get mixed up, and they are now the Warriors of Darkness. And so when you're playing through this game, as you hit certain checkpoints, you'll be bouncing between the 2 different parties with the Warriors of Light and the Warriors of Darkness. And I think that this is one of the ways that the platform that this game came on didn't do it any favors, because you'll be playing a long time as one party, and then you'll eventually be switching to the other party and have completely forgotten what the other party was up to, what kind of build you were doing. Just because of the nature of mobile gaming, it's not the type of game that I sit down and binge. It's the type of game that I play a couple minutes at a time. And so I mean, I could go a whole month playing as the Warriors of Light, only to be bounced back to the Warriors of Darkness, and then I just have no idea what's going on. This is also frustrating because they all have their own levels and job levels, and so it feels like I make a ton of progress, I do a lot of grinding, my party feels strong and at a place where I like it, only to have to do it all over again when I swap to the other party. It also doesn't help that initially these 2 parties have access to the same jobs, but as you progress through the game, the Warriors of Light get access to exclusive jobs and the Warriors of Darkness get access to exclusive jobs, and so it becomes very muddled in terms of what your builds are going to be between each of these 8 characters. So yes, there are jobs. This game pays a homage to Final Fantasy V in that regard. The job system is very similar to it is in that one. Basically, you have job levels, and and every time you level up a job, then you get access to either bonus stats with that job or an exclusive ability. And you can essentially multi-class in a way where if you choose to have a different job, then you can bring abilities from those other jobs that you've leveled up into this new job. So if you wanted to be a white mage but also have some melee capabilities as a monk, you can bring in some abilities from your monk job. I remember this done quite well in Final Fantasy V. I don't think it was done as well in Final Fantasy Dimensions. I feel like the abilities themselves felt a lot more exciting and interesting in Final Fantasy V, but I mean, another thing that's going against it is it's difficult to keep track of all this stuff for the reasons I mentioned earlier. For the majority of the game, this is also fairly linear, and it's not unusual for Final Fantasy to kind of have you go down a designated path for a certain amount of time, but about when you reach the 1/3, the 1/2 mark, then you gain access to the whole world, and then you can slowly go back to old places, you can navigate old towns, you can find hidden areas. But for the majority of the game, that was not the case here. I only got access to the airship about 40 hours into the game, and that's when this became a open world game. But all the time before that, I'm pretty much just going through channels telling me where to go and what to do. As you're navigating through these channels, there are extra dungeons that you can stumble across, and these are usually where you will unlock your summons. Sometimes these extra dungeons are easy to spot, other times you have to do a little more navigating in order to find them. But if you do happen to miss one of these extra dungeons, there aren't a lot of opportunities to go back and get it. So if you miss a summon, then you will have an opportunity to get it later, but it won't be until much later. I also felt like the amount of progression and character growth that I felt as a player was very slow compared to traditional Final Fantasy games. Like, it wasn't until about 30 hours into this game that I finally had access to the Firaga, the Blizzaga, Thundaga spells. Also, in this game, you get Curaja before, which is not how it normally is in other Final Fantasy games. Curaja is normally stronger than Curaga. Now, story-wise, it is a fairly traditional story. The Warriors of Light are going around trying to protect the Crystals of Light from the Empire, and the Warriors of Darkness are trying to protect the Crystals of Darkness from the Empire. As you navigate to these crystals to protect them from the bad guys, you will be aided by a fifth party member. Something will happen to this fifth party member, and then you will obtain their job. So you're only unlocking one new job at a time, and those jobs are only specifically for the Warriors of Light or the Warriors of Darkness. I also think that because you are introduced to all 8 of these main characters at once, and you don't get to spend time with half of them for a prolonged amount of time, it is difficult to keep track of the main characters, what they're about, what their motivations are, who they're related to. They don't stand out like they would in Final Fantasy VI. They don't all have their distinctive personalities. It's not obvious what they're about and what they do. And I'm sure part of that is to maintain the concept of this job system. But I just felt like most of these characters kind of blended together whenever I was playing it. The one standout being Alba, and that's just because she's kind of like the comic relief. She breaks the fourth wall a lot. She does a lot of references to other video games. She talks about herself in third person, but most of the other characters are kind of blended together personality-wise. This game brings back the save points and the tents. So tents are how you heal your HP and MP naturally besides going to an inn, and you can't actually save unless you go to a save point. You can do a quick save, but after you load back into your game, then that save data is deleted, and so you'll eventually need to find a save point, which is another reason that I don't think this game had the mobile gaming platform in mind when it introduced these save points. It is a very grindy game, but I do think that's where being on a mobile platform kind of is a strength for this, because it's easy to just knock out a couple of battles. By the end of the game, I think I was level 85, but you just would hit these these level checks when you encounter these certain bosses. For the regular mobs, they felt like a fine difficulty. Typically, you want mobs where you can auto battle your way through without too much resistance. Occasionally, you have to throw out a couple spells or you have to throw out a couple heals, but the auto battle should be sufficient. But it's these bosses that really start to test your strength. You can do everything you can, use all your strongest abilities, really think out some kind of battle plan, use a well-rounded party, but if your characters are not a high enough level, then they're just not going to be able to defeat this boss. I do think this grinding aspect would have been even more tolerable though if they made the auto battle better. In the auto battle with this game, all your characters are just going to do their basic attack. I wish there was some way to either like program somehow what each character does. I want my Black Mage to be using a spell every time during auto battle, not using his melee attack, but unfortunately that's not the case here. And I do feel that this game kind of forces you to grind anyway because of this high encounter rate. It's entirely possible to be in a dungeon and every 3 steps you are going to be encountering a mob of enemies, and there is no way to turn this off aside from a late game item that you can't get until 40 hours into the game. So I do think there should either be some way to turn off the encounter rate early on in the game, or there should be a way to make the auto battle more intuitive. But you also need to do a ton of grinding in order to have proper buying power. Things are expensive in this game. This isn't the type of JRPG where you can walk into a new town, clear out their shop, and still have plenty of money left over. You do need to save up for all of the powerful gear and all of the powerful spells. And both the Warriors of Darkness and the Warrior of Light have their own separate inventory. So you could do all this grinding for one party, but then you're going to need to do all this grinding for the second party. Also, in terms of combat, it is active timing based, which I think doesn't work well, especially on a mobile phone, because the enemies are going to be attacking you as you're navigating on your mobile phone. So, you know, if you get that text message, if you get distracted just with your casual gaming lifestyle, the enemies are going to keep on going. And so I do feel like this would have been much better if it wasn't active time-based battle. You can turn it into the wait option, where if you are scrolling through spells or items, the enemies won't be attacking you, but if you're sitting at the main screen, the enemies are just going to keep on attacking you. It just feels like there's a lot of filler in this game, both in terms of gameplay and the story. It is a long Final Fantasy game. It took me 48 hours to finally beat this game, which is much longer than I usually spend on Final Fantasy games, especially like the older Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy V, the one that this was based on, took me maybe 20-25 hours to beat. So it is a long game to get through. And I guess if you see it in terms of chapters, maybe if you chunk it up in terms of chapters, it won't feel as long. But if you do that one-time purchase and you're just playing this all in one go, that is a huge game. I will say that once you hit a certain point about 45 hours into the game, a lot of my complaints are gone. And I won't go any more into depth than that, but a lot of these things that I complained about suddenly were repaired, and suddenly this felt a lot more like a traditional Final Fantasy game, and I wish that the whole game had been like that. I wish you didn't have to play 40 hours of this game to finally get to the point where it felt like a really good Final Fantasy game. I do think with a couple tweaks to the gameplay mechanics while keeping the mobile game platform in mind as you're designing these, this could have been a really great game in the minds of many Final Fantasy fans. I do feel like a lot of people dismiss this game initially because it's just on mobile, and so I think in order to get this game back into the spotlight, it would benefit greatly from some sort of pixel remaster and be put on modern day gaming consoles. I don't think that'll ever happen, but I do think that's what needs to happen in order for people to recognize this game for an actual mainline Final Fantasy game, because it does have a lot of the traditional Final Fantasy games aspects. You have a lot of your main Final Fantasy characters. There's a Cid in this game, although for most of the game he's an antagonist, which is unusual. You have your Biggs, you have Eduardo, you have all the traditional jobs like your bards and your dragoons, you have your crystals and a big evil empire trying to take advantage of them. It's just that there are a lot of critical flaws in this game design, at least in my opinion, that is keeping this game from greatness. By the end of the game, yeah, it took me about 48 hours to play through, and although the end game I think really elevated this for me in my mind, I finally got that power complex that I love getting in the end of Final Fantasy games, where I feel really strong. I'm using all these awesome abilities and summons, and that certainly lifted up my opinion of this game, but it took too long to get to that point. So I am going to give this game a 3 out of 5, and my feelings on it are going to be rather mixed at this point. I do hear that there is a Final Fantasy Dimensions 2, but that one actually does fall into the mobile game shenanigans. I don't know too many details, but it has a lot of pay-to-win gotcha aspects as far as I understand. Well, folks, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Final Fantasy Dimensions, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!